Saparvajakacharya Asatara Sat Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrindi Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi, Gauda Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath, Shamkund Radhakund, Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. And all glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada. Oh God, please speak. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 8, Text number 3. Katayasva Mahabhaga Yata Aham Akila Atmani Krishna Niveshya Nihasangam Manaha Diyakshe Kalevaram. I guess that's it. Yeah. Okay. Katayasva Mahabhaga Yataham Akhilatmani Krishna Niveshani Sangam Manastyakshe Kalevaram. Katayasva Mahabhaga Yataham Akhilatmani Krishna Niveshani Sangam Manastyakshe Kalevaram. Katayasva Mahabhaga Yataham Akhil Atmani Krishna Niveshani Sangam Manastyakshe Kalevaram. Please chant. Ladies, please. Anyone else? Synonyms. Katayasva. Please continue speaking. Mahabhaga. O greatly fortunate one. Yata. As much as. Aham. I. Akila Atmani. Unto the Supreme Soul. Krishna. Unto Lord Sri Krishna. Niveshya. Placed. The Sangam. Being freed from material qualities. Manaha. Mind. Tyakshe. Relinquish. Kalevaram. Body. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Next a little stiff today, so please. Translation. O greatly fortunate Shukdeva Goswami, please continue narrating Srimad Bhagavatam so that I can place my mind upon the Supreme Soul, Lord Krishna, and being completely freed from material qualities, thus relinquish this body. So King Pariksit is talking now. He has 7 days to live, and he wants to be very fixed up, totally fixed up, wholly fixed up in Krishna consciousness, and that's why he's saying what he has just said. Purport. To be fully engaged in hearing the transcendental narration described in the next of Srimad Bhagavatam means to constantly associate with the Supreme Soul, Sri Krishna. And to constantly associate with the Supreme Lord Krishna means to be liberated from the qualities of matter. Lord Krishna is like the sun, and material contamination is like the darkness. As the presence of the sun dissipates darkness, constant engagement in the association of Lord Sri Krishna frees one from the contamination of the material qualities. Contamination by the material qualities is the cause of repeated birth and death. And liberation from material qualities is transcendence. Maharaj Pariksit was now a realized soul by this secret of liberation through the grace of Shukadeva Goswami. For the latter had informed the king that the highest perfection of life is to be in remembrance of Narayan at the end of life. Maharaj Pariksit was destined to give up his body at the end of 7 days. And thus he decided to continue remembering the Lord by his association with the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam, and thus to quit his body in full consciousness of the presence of the Lord Krishna, the Supreme Soul. The hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam performed by professional men is different from the transcendental hearing of Maharaj Pariksit. Maharaj Pariksit was a soul realized in the absolute truth, Sri Krishna. The personality of Godhead. The fruitive materialist is not a realized soul. He wants to derive some material benefit from his so-called hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam. Undoubtedly, such an audience, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from the professional men or reciters, can derive some material benefit as they desire. But that does not mean that such a pretense of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam for a week is as good as the hearing of Maharaj Pariksit, who simply wanted to be absorbed in love of Krishna. Doesn't say that there, but that's the meaning behind it. It is the duty of the sane to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Sane means to be not insane. So, one who is sober-minded. It is the duty of the sane to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from a self-realized soul, and not be duped by professional men. A professional man. Now, professional actually has a very good connotation, but in this case it has a very bad one. And Prabhupada means that one who wants money, one who wants sense pleasure, one who wants adoration, one who wants profit, distinction, anything but God realization or God love. So in this context, professional means something not appreciated, not very beneficial. One should continue such hearing till the end of one's life, so that one can actually have the transcendental association of the Lord and thus be liberated simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Maharaj Parikshit had already given up all his connections with his kingdom and family, the most attractive features of materialism, but still he was conscious of his material body. He wanted to be free of such bondage also by the constant association of the Lord. Omagyanat himarandasya gananjana shalakaya chakshul unmalitam yena tasmai shri guruve namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. Jai. So I want to repeat the translation and comment upon Srila Prabhupada's purport. O greatly fortunate Shukdeva Goswami. So this is Parikshit Maharaj speaking. Notice the language that is being used. O greatly fortunate Shukdeva. What does he mean by fortunate? He means he's a God-realized soul, and he sees and hears and feels God whenever and wherever he goes. That's a fortunate person. A person who is forgetting, who does not know, who doesn't care about God, is very unfortunate. So, O greatly fortunate Shukdeva Goswami, please continue narrating Srimad Bhagavatam. And what is the meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam? Srimad means beautiful, and Bhagavatam means the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that I can place my mind upon the Supreme Soul, Lord Krishna, and being completely freed from material qualities by having the mind constantly in touch, constantly in connection, constantly in relationship with the Supreme Lord, one becomes freed from material qualities, and thus when one relinquishes the body, he relinquishes it and goes back home, back to Godhead, because he's free of these material qualities. It is the material qualities that hold us here, that tie us here, entangle us here, and don't let us leave here. So, what Parikshit, who is a realized soul, says, I don't want to be here. I don't want another time with a body like this. I just want to go home and associate with the Lord in countless spiritual qualities and activities. So in the purport, I'm going to go over it. There are a number of things that I would like to cover. To be fully engaged in hearing the transcendental narration described in the text of Srimad Bhagavatam means means to constantly associate with the Supreme Soul, Sri Krishna. And to constantly associate with the Supreme Lord, Krishna, means to be liberated from the qualities of matter. So this is a very important statement. It means the more we treasure, the more we cherish, the more we value this Bhagavatam, the more we are valuing the Supreme Lord. And when we value the Supreme Lord, we have appreciation of the Lord, we cherish the Lord, we don't think of it as just another book, but it is a very important, very great, very glorious book, a book that will take us from the material clutches, out of the clutches, to the divine world. When we regard, and that's what Prabhupada is asking us to do, to please regard this book as being non-different from Krishna. And if you do that, and don't think of it as just another book with pages are turned and it's made of paper and there's ink on it. No, that's not what it is. It's God. And when we actually have that faith, when we have that love, we have that respect, that reverence, Krishna is very pleased, and he does give us his grace because we are making an effort to truly come home to him, glorify him, and honor him. Archana, can you tell me what the next sentence is? By any chance? I couldn't. What did he say? What? You didn't get it. Anyway, I'll do the best I can. Second, well, there is, on the page I'm on, there's only one page on page. Okay, let me do the best I can, and please forgive me if I went over the same thing, but it doesn't, you don't lose anything by hearing it again. Contamination by the material qualities is the cause of repeated birth and death. And liberation from material qualities is transcendence. So what does that mean, to be transcendent? To be transcendence. To be transcendence means it's all spirit. Material qualities is not spirit qualities, spiritual qualities. It means the qualities that bring us back home: lust and anger and greed, envy, illusion, sloth, indolence, sleep, overeating. All these qualities keep us here. But transcendence is that which takes us where? To the transcendental world, because it is characterized by qualities. Transcendence is not merely a word. It means more than just transcendence. What it means is to go up, to go beyond, to go over. Over what? Over the material world. And go to the spiritual world. A world of peace, a world of love, a world of bliss, a world of ecstasy, a world of heart-filled feelings, a world of patience, understanding. These are qualities which differ us from a materialist who is very impatient, very lacking in understanding, very wanting to simply achieve some material goal, thinking that that goal, which will disappear at some point, will give him true peace, true happiness, and true fulfillment. It's a lie. It's a delusion. Maharaj Parikshit was now a realized soul. So what does it mean to be a realized soul? So we think about this for a little bit. We hear this word over and over and over again. But what does it really mean to be a realized soul? Am I a realized? Are you a realized soul? Unless you know the real meaning of realized, then you can't answer that. To be a realized soul means that you have some degree. There are different degrees, of realization. There's low levels of realization where one is just starting to acquire that realization. And then there are higher levels of realization such as Srila Prabhupada had. So I'll try to deal with them to some degree, to the degree that Krishna allows me to speak it. So a low level of realization simply means you're beginning to feel the presence of Krishna. It's blissful, it's peaceful, it's uplifting, but it's on a small level, a little level, and you're getting something that you never had before. So, and that should not be discounted or looked down upon. And then there are higher levels where one begins to feel more than just the presence, but one begins to feel something really moving in the heart. And there's higher where one actually begins to lose external consciousness and has internal consciousness and actually sees Krishna. And then there is still higher where one has communication with Krishna. Srila Prabhupada had all these things and then some. Okay? I cannot even begin to talk about his realization because I'm so millions of miles away from it. But nonetheless, he demonstrated very clearly that he was unaffected, undisturbed, unshaken, unrattled, unruffled by this material world and maintained a peaceful mentality at all times, even when he appeared to be upset or angry or upset or disturbed. Next second, he was again back to his peaceful state. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada would fake anger because devotees were not acting properly, and they had already been taught how they should. And so what Prabhupada would do is that he would chastise them. And when he chastised them, he could get very apparently angry. He never had any real anger because he knew he was not the body. He knew he was not being affected. No talking, please. He knew he was not being affected. He knew he was not being disturbed. None of that. And that's why in a few seconds, as soon as he had done the chastisement, he was back to his smiling, loving self. This is a realized soul, by the way, on a very high level. So, therefore, one can also go to still higher levels of realization. And when we read the Chaitanya Charitamrita in some of these kirtans that were held at Srivas Thakur's house, these devotees would not only be feeling the ecstasy throughout their entire bodies and be seeing Krishna within their hearts, but they couldn't even keep standing up. They would fall down. And after they fell down, they couldn't even keep steady. They would roll around. These are all symptoms of ecstasy, of God realization. It's not something we should be yearning for. That's not what we yearn for. They come as a result of serving Krishna with such love, with such devotion, with such dedication, with such surrender, that Krishna blesses them, graces them, pours upon them his bliss, his peace, his love. And when the devotee feels that, when it enters the heart, it swells one. And one begins to feel the different symptoms of ecstasy, such as trembling, like that, or tears start to flow down from the eyes, or a person's voice becomes choked up. We saw in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Lord Chaitanya was dancing at Ratha Yatra, he manifested one of those symptoms. He wanted to say the word Jagannath, but he couldn't say it because he was that's the way it reads, Jagagaga, not Jagannath. Because choking up is another symptom of ecstasy that one receives. It's not to be put on. It's not to be faked, as I sometimes see devotees do. They fake it. They try to make you believe that they're achieving or have achieved something that they have not. And that's the worst thing that a person can actually do, because that's the way to turn Krishna off, turn him away from giving you that real ecstasy. Actually, a devotee who's sincere, who's serious, and who's very much eager to please Krishna, he doesn't even care about those symptoms. He couldn't care less about those symptoms. All he wants is to give pleasure to the Lord. How can I satisfy Krishna? How can I fulfill his wishes? And that's it. And just in that mood, in that manner, that understanding, the Lord douses him with much love, much ecstasy, much bliss, happiness, and so forth. So much so that he can't, in some cases, as I just mentioned, they can't stand up. They fall to the ground. They roll around on the ground. They cry out, Seems like he's crazy, but he's not. He's in great, serious, deep ecstasy. So I think I've taken enough on the word a realized soul, from the beginning going up higher and higher and higher. And so we can know whether where we are by the symptoms that are being evidenced by us. Yes, so Maharaj Parikshit was now a realized soul. Again, different degrees of realization. Which degree he is at, I'm not going to say at this point, but obviously he was able to speak. And still higher levels of realization, one can barely speak. And then sometimes one cannot speak. He just, these are different symptoms of realization. So anyway, it says he was now a realized soul. It also means that he knows he's not the body. It means that he knows that he is the spirit soul, he's part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, and that he has a loving relationship with that Supreme Soul, and he feels that loving relationship with the Supreme Soul, and he's very grateful for having that relationship with the Supreme Soul, and he cannot thank the Supreme Soul enough. He always feels short of thanks because it's so valuable, it's so great. It's so blessed. It's so high. It's something that, generally speaking, people have no idea about. And we are privileged by Srila Prabhupada talking about all of these things in his numerous purports to teach us about where we have to go. But this is not the goal. The goal is not to be blissful. The goal is to give Krishna an increase, an intensity, a higher aspect of his own bliss. This is very, very important. The devotee who's true, who's pure, who's full of love, doesn't think of himself. He thinks only of Krishna's situation. The gopis were always thinking of how they could increase Krishna's joyfulness. Sometimes people say that the gopis were egotistical because they made their faces beautiful, their eyebrows, they put on these beautiful, it seemed like they were looking for self-praise. It's very clearly mentioned in Srila Prabhupada's purports. Anything but that is the truth. The very opposite is. What they were concerned about is this, that when they would dress up beautifully, when they put their hair, do their eyes, and all of these things, Krishna would smile at their beautiful faces, and it would bring Krishna happiness to see such beauty. That's what they wanted. They wanted to give pleasure to Krishna, not get pleasure from Krishna by saying, oh, you look beautiful, oh, you're glorious, oh, how wonderful you are. They cared nothing for those things, which is a materialistic quality. But all they wanted is Krishna is happier looking at our faces, then I will make my face look gorgeous and beautiful, and not get any egotistical satisfaction from that. Okay? Interesting principle. The gopis are considered, with Radharani at the head, the highest level of spiritual advancement in the Madhurya Ras. And there are two books which I have, which are written by Purushottama, Purushottama Swami. There are two books, two volumes on Radharani, volume 1 and 2. They are incredible books. They're all based upon Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavat, and so many aspects which deals directly with Radharani. And it's mentioned very clearly there that there is no devotee who can rank anywhere near her in devotional love for Krishna. And Krishna himself says that. Maharaj Parikshit was, I already said that, sorry, for the latter had informed the king that the highest perfection of life to be in is to be in remembrance of Narayan at the end of life. I'd like to reread that little sentence there. Through the grace of Shukdeva Goswami, for the latter had informed the king that the highest perfection of life is to be in remembrance of Narayan at the end of life. So I would like to add something to that, and Prabhupada has said that so many times, not only to be in remembrance of Narayan or Krishna at the end of life, but during the course of one's life. That's the way we get to be in remembrance at the end of life. If during the course of our life we're not remembering Krishna, and we hope that at the end of life we will, when actually all we've been thinking about during the course of our life is my car, my home, my kids, my mother, my father, my boat, my business. If all I've been thinking about is that, then why should I think of Krishna at the end of my life? Because I've been thinking of other things, and that has been my habit. So the habit should be, as it's mentioned here, that at the end of life we should always remember Narayan, always remember Krishna, and what's the other side of it? And never Yes, and never forget life. Actually, they mean the same, but they're just different words. Maharaj Parikshit was destined to give up his body at the end of 7 days. Do we know why 7 days? Because he was cursed. And I won't go into that whole story except to say that King Parikshit at one time was out hunting. This will be a brief summary. He was out hunting at one time, and he came upon the hermitage of Samipya. Samipya. Muni. And he came inside, and Samipya Muni just happened to be in a very deep state of samadhi. Now, in a very deep state of samadhi, you don't see anything, you don't hear anything, you don't feel anything on your skin. You are completely absorbed, immersed, and in a truly realized state. You may be seeing Krishna, or you may be on that, moving in that direction, but the important thing is you do not feel the senses. You're beyond the senses at that time. So he could not hear. So when King Parikshit came into the kutir, he was very thirsty. He had been out hunting, and he was kind of panting. And he said, "My dear sage, could you please give me some water?" So the sage said nothing. He just sat there with his eyes closed. So the king, not being in his normal consciousness, his normal mind, because he was so thirsty and a little hungry, he said, "I said, O sage, that I would like to have some water. Could you please give me some water?" No answer. So he got angry. "Who do you think you are? You think because you're a Brahmin and I'm a Kshatriya that you can treat me in this insolent fashion? Ha! Is that what you think?" Well, he turned around and he stomped out the door, and as he was walking down the steps, there was a dead snake. And he looked at the snake, and he looked or glanced back at the sage, and he picked up the snake, walked back in, stomped in, and over to the sage, and he says, "So, you think you're so high? You think you're so great? Here, take this." And he took the snake and put it around the shoulders of the sage. Now, while this was going on, outside, while the door was open, two of the sage's sons, the sage had a son, and he had friends, and two of those friends happened to be outside, and they were watching what the king did, and they were almost amazed because King Parikshit was known as a man of courtesy, of sweetness, of kindness, of all good qualities. And here he was taking a snake and putting it around the neck of a sage. This is a horrible, terrible offense. So what happened was that then, of course, the king walked out and went back to his kingdom, but those two boys told the son, I think his name was Shringi, correct me? Yeah, Shringi, and he said, "The king, he put a snake around your father's neck." "What? A snake around your father's neck? Why?" "Well, he was asking for water and your father was in samadhi." "Oh, these Kshatriyas, they must be punished, and I will punish this one. From 7 days today, this king will die of a snake bite." And that was it. And this kid had the power to do it. He was raised as a Brahmin. He had potencies, but he had not been fully trained in the use of these things, and he was misusing it. And finally, what happened is that it got back to his father, what he had done. And he said, "No, you should never have done that because the king is a good person. And he's just, because he wanted something and I couldn't give it to him at that time, I didn't hear it. You should never have done that. It was such a terrible fault. It was such a terrible action. The king is a good person. He rules beautifully. Bad, bad, bad." So he was telling the son that, so that was the situation, in that. So that's why this is coming around. So when the king found out that he was to be, oh boy, things are going fast. That's why I'll try to end this as soon as possible, rest assured. That's why when the king found out that he had been cursed to die in 7 days, he wanted to hear the Bhagavatam from Shukdeva Goswami or from some great sage. And somehow or other, Shukdeva Goswami got the message, went there, sat down, and recited that message for 7 days. And the king took no food, completely empty, just wanted his mind reserved totally for the message of the Bhagavatam that came from Shukdeva Goswami. So, as it's mentioned here, the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam performed by professional men. This is another little area of this because we only have a few seconds to go. So, the point is that the king wanted to remember Krishna, and Shukdeva Goswami was the ideal person to tell the pastimes of Krishna so that the king would become immersed, completely absorbed, completely enthralled by the pastimes of Krishna. And as a result of that, the king would go back home, back to Godhead. At the end, when the snake bird comes and takes the poison and puts it into the king, no fear, no shaking, no worry, no anything. He was ready for it because he had been hearing about Krishna for 7 days and 7 nights. And so he knew where he was going and he welcomed it because he was going back home, going back to Godhead, going back to Krishna, going back to the person he had just been hearing about so elegantly, so in such an intensely fashion. And most people would just be scared. They're going to be poisoned by the bite of the snake, but not Parikshit. He was going back home. And this came, of course, Parikshit, we have to understand, Parikshit, not only at the end of his last 7 days, but throughout his life, he had been living and loving Krishna more and more as he grew older and older. So this was not something new. He asked for the right thing, for the right purpose, to hear the Bhagavatam or to hear about Krishna for the last 7 days of his life. And therefore, those 7 days would be crowned with the greatest fruit or the greatest goal that one could have, and that is to be with Krishna at the end of one's life. I'll just very briefly mention, this is very important because I've seen many devotees be misled and misguided by hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam by professional men. That is a person who simply wants to give the Bhagavatam, make money from it, use the money for sense pleasure and sense gratification. He has no interest either for himself to know Bhagavatam, to love Krishna, or have any understanding of Krishna. His only business is to make a business out of it. And Prabhupada is speaking very horribly about such persons because they are not real, they're not devotees. So, as it's mentioned here, as I'll mention, the fruit of materialists is not a realized soul. He wants to derive some material benefit from his so-called hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam. Undoubtedly, such an audience hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from the professional men. Again, professional can have what we call ameliorative meaning. That means a very beneficial meaning. But in this case, the word professional means a low meaning of a cheater, a person who is trying to simply exploit something for his own purpose. Undoubtedly, such an audience hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from the professional men or reciters can derive some material benefit as they desire, but that does not mean that such a pretense of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam for a week is as good as the hearing of Maharaj Parikshit. It is the duty of the sane not to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from a self-realized soul and not be duped by professional men. I have seen people in this temple, in fact, there's a person I know who was duped by such a person. Fortunately, Savas was able to disentangle that person from that person, and become free of it. But very often we think that because a person can he could speak in a very, very highfalutin, very high-sounding spiritual way with all Sanskrit words and this, and look very, very eloquent, very, very high, very important, when he actually knows nothing except how to fall down himself, which he already is, and how to cause others to fall down. So, I want to thank everyone here for listening. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share this with you, and there's much more to it. Let us all please continue listening to, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, coming to these classes, and encouraging the speakers to go on and on and on, so that we can all know Krishna, love Krishna, and be blessed by Krishna. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. No, thank you so much. Thank you. You know who I'm talking about, don't you? Okay. Okay. No, I felt that was one of the greatest things you could.